Welcome back to the Sports Beat KC podcast. This is Jesse Newell, KU beat reporter for the Kansas City Star. I'm joined once again this week by columnist extraordinaire and a guy who makes 3 games in 3 days look easy, Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star. Blair, how did you make it to all those games in one weekend?
Well, hey Jesse, it was fun, and I got to see 3 victories by local teams, which are teams that we cover anyway, which was made it easier to talk to people after the games, as it often does. But it was a lot of hours in the car on the interstates in the midwestern part of the country going east, and not as much sleep as I'd like, but it was really the only way to get it done. The flights didn't work out the way I needed them to, but it was fun to do, and I'll tell you what, it made for it. You kind of go on adrenaline for a couple of days. That third day driving back from Pittsburgh Monday was a little rough.
Yeah, the adrenaline runs out then. So yeah, you covered a Royals game on Friday night. For those people that don't know, drove to, I guess it's West Lafayette, Indiana, for the Purdue Missouri game, and then continued the drive, I guess early the next morning to get to Pittsburgh for the Chiefs game, and then drove back the next day.
Yeah. After the Steelers, we got out of Pittsburgh about 9 o'clock after doing our Facebook Live, and I ended up driving for about 2.5, 3 hours to try to get a head start on the next day. So I got to Columbus, Ohio, and almost I was in Columbus, and I didn't realize it until the next morning. You know, Urban Meyer was giving was about to do his another one of his explanation press conferences. I was about 15 miles from the campus, and I thought about driving over there for that, but I thought, you know what, I've had enough event coverage here for the last 3 days. I think I'm just going to point the car west and head home.
It's time to get home, for sure. Well, and we were talking, Blair, you were able to, in one of the car travels you had, you were able to listen to some of KU's game, and wow, we were talking about this. A lot of times this time of year, we're looking for reasons to not talk about KU football or looking for reasons to talk about KU basketball. KU football's 2-1. They have a 55-14 victory over Rutgers this past week. We're going to look ahead here in a minute to talk about the Baylor game upcoming, but I mean, let's talk big picture right now, Blair, for this program. You can't really call them the worst Power 5 program out there anymore. They took care of a Power 5 program by 41 points this past week, and all of a sudden, after a catastrophic first week against Nicholls State, things are looking pretty good for KU. David Beatty, the coaching staff, everyone listed above, and it's crazy kind of how things change and the perspective can change here in a couple weeks.
Well, what a good feeling there must be in those in the hallways of the football program, in the football offices, in the locker room. Just walking around campus for these guys. What something that hasn't been felt by football players in almost a decade at KU. So I know we mentioned it last week when we were talking about the win over Central Michigan, that it was you felt great for the players who hadn't experienced anything like that. And now I was, with Kansas, we're so unaccustomed to this, the type of game that they won on Saturday, that I didn't know how they would react coming off of breaking the big road losing streak. Was it too much? Would they be overwhelmed by it? And it turns out they based on the result, they handled it perfectly. They gained confidence from it. They didn't lose attention or focus. They watched film. They did everything they were supposed to do, and then they took it to an opponent that was not favored. Kansas was a slight favorite in this game, but in the preseason we would have thought maybe Rutgers would have been favored.
Yep.
And B, another FBS opponent. I don't care if Rutgers is the worst team in the Big Ten. They're an FBS opponent. They're a Power 5 school, and Kansas had lost to an FCS school earlier this year. So they could not have reacted better to the win of the previous week. And I got to think confidence is at an all-time high at KU, and now we'll see where it goes from here. The win the previous week wasn't a fluke, and maybe dare it be said, this is not a bad football team.
Yeah, well, here's the reality, I think, with KU football, and it's bright for a reason, and it's not as bright as you might think for a reason. The one thing, and I wrote about this last week, Blair, the one thing I think that has to be talked about that is the thing that just hits you over the head with this Kansas football team is the defense has made a monumental jump this year. They brought in some players. They added some depth to the secondary. They got Daniel Wise and Joe Deneen back. But what they've done over the first 3 games, and especially the last 2, has been phenomenal. I mean, they have forced 3 and outs. They have forced turnovers. They have been dominant. They have been overwhelming. There haven't been openings in the run game with run fits. There have not been openings in the pass game deep down the field. The defense is what's lifted this team up. That's encouraging. Yet it's also, if you're a Kansas fan, you have to look at this through the normal glasses and not just the rosy glasses and say, every team you face isn't going to turn it over 6 times a game. And the last 2 games, KU has been able to force 6 turnovers each game. So there's good news and there's bad news. I broke down a play today on a blog at kansas.com. People want to check it out. It's Mike Lee's pick 6. It actually ended up as the number 6 play on SportsCenter's top 10, which is really impressive on a day of college football, in the middle of college football season.
Wow.
For a KU play to end up on the top 10, I mean, you're talking about lots and lots of things going on a Saturday, a college football Saturday, and MLB and MLS and everything else you want to talk about. You know, he made a bunch of tacklers miss, getting a 31-yard interception return. But the breakdown of the play when I talked to a Division I assistant coach I was talked to kind of get some insight on this was KU really ran an exotic sub-package with it. You know, they put a Russian in the game, and instead of him rushing, they put him out in coverage, and that left KU's Mike Lee as kind of a robber type where he kind of gets to stand in the middle of the field and play center field, and he ended up getting the interception. But the bottom line is they tricked a young quarterback in Rutgers. They're doing some things that are creative and interesting and some things they might not have been able to do a year ago because they didn't have the guys coming back with experience. And the coach I talked to said, look, these can get really complicated. These are things you can do that are really tricky and great as a defense. But the problem is if you spend too much time with that, you don't get your base defense down. And all of a sudden you'd have nothing to rely upon. So Kansas, with so many guys returning, with so many players emerging and stepping up, I think what's happened is Clint Bowen now has faith in his guys that they know the groundwork of what he wants to do. So now he can get a little fancier. Now he can do some additional things, and those additional things have caused some major problems with a couple of bad quarterbacks in the last 2 weeks. So when you're looking at this, it's positive KU has these takeaways, and it's positive that they've been plus 12 on turnover margin, 4 more than any other FBS team out there. Is that going to continue? No, but yet the defense still as a whole, the way they've been able to force 3 and outs, the way they've been able to creatively scheme to get some of these turnovers, that is what can happen moving forward. Not the 6 turnovers a game, but maybe 1 or 2 turnovers a game, plus the 3 and outs, plus the defense getting off the field. That's what you have to be encouraged about if you're a KU football fan.
Well, and also not giving it away as well. I mean, if there's the turnover margins, it's a 2-pronged stat. It's takeaway and giveaway. So, and Kansas isn't doing that. So you're right. That's a good point. And so it's allowing Clint Bowen to be a little bit more open up a defensive playbook that he might not have been able to do in previous years. And that's encouraging. Absolutely encouraging to hear. That's what other programs get to do. Why doesn't Kansas get to do it? Because they never had the numbers to do it, to get it done, and now that's not the case. So how does that apply going forward? You're right. Turnovers, and that's something that I've learned from the Phil Steele yearbooks over the years. Turnovers equal turnaround.
Yep.
And they're absolutely true. Teams that have not gotten many takeaways the previous year and start getting them, that does turn around a season, and then the following season, it's not you can coach your guys. I've heard David Beatty talking about this, coaching, even having their players fall on incomplete passes, things like that, just getting into a mindset of getting the football on the defensive side. And it's great that they're teaching that, and it's an emphasis, and it's obviously paying off for them. But you just can't count on it week to week, especially as the level of opposition improves. So there have to be other ways, other avenues to win a football game, and that begins this week for Kansas. As Baylor, obviously, not what Baylor was years ago. 1-11 last year, but still, I think it's beginning to take the step up from every team that Kansas played in the non-conference. And now it's just a different level of play, and so Kansas becomes, I really do think this, a real national curiosity, not just a regional curiosity, but a national curiosity. And I think there's a lot of people interested in what Kansas is about and how they're going to come out and play against a Baylor team that, at least in the preseason, few would have believed the Jayhawks had a chance to defeat.
Yeah, a lot of different points to hit on there, Blair. Number one, you talked about Baylor being 1-11 last year. Well, the one was Kansas in Lawrence, 38-9, and a dominating performance made KU look like the much inferior team in that one. You talk about the national intrigue, absolutely has happened. I think, who was it? Kirk Herbstreit tweeted out KU as his number 2 team of the week a week ago, and who knew that Kirk Herbstreit knew that Kansas football existed? Something else we have to at least hit upon. Pro Football Focus put 3 KU players on their national offensive and defensive players of the week this past week, including Puka Williams, the running back, who right now, as we sit here, Blair, through 1/4 of the regular season college football, is the number 1 rated running back in the nation, according to Pro Football Focus, which grades every single play of every single FBS player. This is something like I'm sitting down for this because this is something that doesn't happen. We're not talking about KU having a top 25 player, which would be impressive at his position, or a top 10 player, which would be impressive at his position. We're talking about KU having the number 1 overall player at running back. And I'm sorry, if this continues, if you are the number 1 rated player at running back, I know usually you want the team to win and have a successful record. If that sort of play continues from Puka Williams, he's going to end up on Heisman discussions. And this, again, KU football and Heisman are things that we do not put together, Blair. So I agree with you that there is some national intrigue with this Kansas team right now, especially after the last 2 weeks. And instead of becoming a laughingstock, they've kind of flipped that narrative, and people are interested in what's going to happen next.
Well, and it also allows Peyton Bender an opportunity to be for the offense to be a more diverse, and for Bender to be a more effective quarterback when the running game is this successful. But let me just say, being rated by Pro Football Focus is no small thing. I mean, we can talk about how other writers craft stories about Kansas and what other journalists are saying, but Pro Football Focus they really do put in the work on this, their team and breaking down film. And yeah, we do have to take into account the level of competition. It's not what it's not what every team in the country is playing right now. The Kansas, even though they're 2 FBS programs back to back, they were not, they're not powerful. I doubt either one of them becomes bowl eligible this year. Nevertheless, to have 3 people on their team is, on their team of the week is based on analysis and film breakdown, and that's tremendous for Kansas to have. These guys are getting coached and taking the coaching and utilizing it and it performed well in the games, and it's I didn't expect it. I just didn't expect this to happen. It's not. If you told me before the season Kansas would be 2-1 games, I might have said, yeah, I can buy that. Sure, I see that, but not this way. Not this way. And yeah, we can talk about how they should be 3-0, but they're 2-1 and feeling very good about themselves.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this Baylor matchup a little bit, Blair. Like you said, Baylor coming off a loss to Duke this past week, probably not feeling good about itself, which honestly that's kind of what's happened to KU in this last 2 opponents now. We talked about last week Rutgers coming off the huge loss to Ohio State. Baylor should not be feeling too great about itself coming into this game. However, and this is the however I'm always going to get to, Waco has just been a place of nightmares for Kansas lately, and when you go back to the matchup last year in Lawrence, you combine that with it. David Beatty's teams have not performed well against Baylor. I put it in my preview story that the 3 games he's played against Baylor, KU has lost 66-7, 49-7, and 38-9. And if you go back to the last 4 games in Waco that KU's played, they've been outscored. You ready for this? 205-42. So I guess. Take me to what you see in this matchup, Blair. The only thing I will say about it is, if you're looking just preseason, what we thought about these 2 teams before the year started, Baylor was 9th in the preseason poll, KU was 10th. I know this is still a game being played on the road, but if you're Kansas, it kind of is the reverse. It's the opposite of starting off with an Oklahoma or something like that. This is going to be one of the more winnable games on the Big 12 schedule compared to some of the other games out there. So I guess how do you see this one, and how do you see KU matching up against the Bears?
Yeah, so based on perception, and that's all preseason polls are, based on perception, this is, this would be one of Kansas's victory preseason, as we were looking at Kansas in the preseason, one of their opportunities for victory. And certainly the way the non-conference schedule has played out, there's that reinforces the idea that this becomes one of the better opportunities for a conference victory for Kansas. And man, to win one on the road, good gosh, it's that would be a tremendous step for David Beatty. With Baylor, it's funny how Kansas over the years has matched up much better against TCU, right, and Kansas State than Baylor, even though you could make a case that those three programs have been somewhat, equal, in overall records in the last previous 4 or 5 years.
Speed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now this Kansas team just seems better equipped to match up against Baylor. Even it's not the Art Briles Baylor, it's the Matt Rule Baylor, but even so, they have recruited great athletes down there. Matt Rule's done a really nice job recruiting based on the rankings, but it hasn't translated into results yet at Baylor. 1-11 last year, as you mentioned, and then kind of got handled by Duke, scoreless in the first half. And Duke to kind of come back attempt by Baylor, but it falls short. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Baylor. Charlie Brewer, the quarterback there, and actually I think they used two quarterbacks against Duke last week. So I don't know what Baylor knows what to make of it. I was listening to that game as well, to Indiana last week, and it, I know John Morris, their play-by-play guy. He was kind of at a loss to explain what was going on and the lack of success Baylor was having in the first half of that game. It's a little bit of a mystery what's going on with the Bears, and it may take a little bit longer for Matt Rule to get it done there. And he's trying to do it in a little bit different way. They still recruit the great athletes that are available in that part of the country that everybody in the Big 12 wants to get, but it's not the same offense that we saw under Art Briles that was just so prolific and difficult to defend. I don't know. I think with a good defense that you can slow the game down, you can slow Baylor down, and with a running game that we've seen now for 2 weeks, and you mentioned Puka Williams earlier. We know he's eligible for this week, so that's a good sign, right? He'll be suited up and playing in this game. So I absolutely give Kansas a better chance in this game than I did 3 weeks ago. I don't know if I'm going to pick them to win or not, but I certainly, my feeling about Kansas in games like this, that's not Oklahoma or West Virginia right now. I'm 2 weeks is enough to convince me that it's time to start thinking differently about this Kansas team.
We will see, Blair. That's encouraging for KU fans. I guess I am just totally what's the word? Ruined. I just, in my head, I keep seeing Josh Gordon getting a screen pass out on the 6-yard line and running straight without making a move. No moves, just running straight down the sideline 94 yards against KU. And very famously, Steven Johnson, one of the greatest guys that has ever come through KU. Just a great person to talk to after the game. KU got beat down by Baylor one year, and we asked him about it afterwards. What did you see? What did you think? And he just said, I want to know what they're feeding those guys. I want to know where these guys come from. And those things just never leave your head, that the times I've gone down to cover KU in Waco, that those are the type of quotes and types of plays that happen, that KU just gets run out of the building. And so maybe that's just me putting too much on recent history, but I think I'm going to pick Baylor to win this one rather easily, just because of KU has won one in a row on the road, which is good for them, but I still, it's just been a place that they've struggled so badly in recent years. And before the year, I probably would have said Baylor was about a 2-touchdown favorite, and now that it's down to like 7.5, I'm thinking, ooh, maybe we've swung a little bit too far in what we think that KU and Baylor are, and I don't expect the turnovers to happen at the same rate that they have against inferior opponents. So I'm going to pick Baylor big in this one, but I listen, if KU's defense comes up and shows up in this one, gets the 3 and outs that they've been doing, and shows that it can match up with speed better than it has in past years, then I think we'll learn something very major about this Kansas team coming up here in Week 4.
Well, the opponent winning big is the one result that hasn't happened with Kansas so far this year, right? We've had Kansas losing close, Kansas winning big twice. Kansas losing big has been off the board so far this year. Hey, let me run a little theory by you real quick. I think we've talked about the Baylor athletes. I think one of the reasons that the Big 12 took a dip in national esteem and on the field fortunes in the last, 6, 7, since maybe the decade, is because of the rise of Baylor and TCU and Texas A&M going into the SEC. You just had more coaches getting great Texas athletes than just Texas and Oklahoma, which wasn't the case when the Big 12 started and then the decade of the 2000s. It seemed like every year the Texas OU game was for the BC, would put a BC, that winner would go to the BCS championship game. And then that stopped. And it stopped about the time that the Colt McCoy Texas team and Sam Bradford Oklahoma teams moved on, and Baylor started getting good with RG3, and Texas TCU got in conference, and A&M left to go to the SEC and bring those guys into the state to recruit. And I think we're sort of still there in some ways. Look at what the Texas fortunes that really haven't reversed, and Oklahoma's gotten it back a little bit, but I think it's the athletes that you see at Baylor and TCU and at Texas A&M have had an impact on the Big 12 in different ways. And you're right, when you see Baylor play, and you saw them play in their, in the Josh Gordon and RG3 and even teams after that, you never saw those guys at Baylor before, but you saw them, in the year that Baylor, won and tied for the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, and again, speaking with people that know Baylor better than me too, it seems like they still have some of that sort of speed, that sort of receiver talent, and that might never run dry at Baylor. But I just remember the years when they were really, really good too. We were talking about their offensive linemen. We were saying, man, look at these linemen they have in here. Along with that, we're not talking about them enough. It seems like that's kind of the part that's reverted back, that if KU is going to be able to get this Baylor team, they're going to have to take advantage of what's been a deficiency, at least so far through 3 games for Baylor, that they haven't been able to get it out always to their speed and their talent on the outside, because they haven't had any time to throw the ball, and some of those big guys up front maybe have not been as what they thought they were going to be going into the season.
There you go.
All right, Blair, we're going to wrap the Sports BKC podcast episode up there. For Blair, this is Jesse. Thanks for checking it out, and be sure to tune in for another episode next week.